You're nothing but dead weight now, Mother. Thaddeus's words sliced through me like a surgeon's scalpel, precise, cold, and devastating. My eldest son stood over my hospital bed, his tailored Brioni suit as impeccable as his calculated stare. Behind him, Persephone scrolled mindlessly through her phone, occasionally glancing up to nod in agreement. Only Quentin, my youngest, had the decency to look uncomfortable, though he remained silent, studying the pattern on the linoleum floor. Just 3 weeks after my spinal fusion surgery, and my children had already determined I was obsolete. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never expected to find myself here at 60, lying in a hospital bed wearing a rigid back brace, with 3 grown children discussing my options as if I weren't in the room. The accident that fractured my L4 and L5 vertebrae happened so quickly. One moment, I was inspecting a property renovation in the Embarcadero district. The next, I was on the ground, having fallen through rotted floorboards that should have been marked off. The recovery timeline is extensive, Dr. Valencia Co. had explained during her morning rounds, her kind eyes the only warmth I'd felt since being admitted. 6 months minimum before you're back to normal activity. The first 3 months will require significant assistance. Which is exactly the problem, Thaddeus interjected, stepping forward with the authority he'd cultivated during 15 years at Pinnacle Capital. Mother's house has 3 flights of stairs. She has no live-in help. None of us live closer than an hour away. I have the guest room prepared, I said quietly, my voice still raspy from intubation. Zach has already installed handrails in the bathroom and… Zach Sterling? Persephone finally looked up from her phone, her perfect eyebrows arching with disdain. That ancient contractor who still drives that dreadful green truck? Mother, please. You need professional care, not some retirement-age handyman checking in occasionally. I bit back a response about Zach's unwavering loyalty over 30 years, how he'd been there after their father, Harlan, died. It wouldn't matter. My children had made up their minds before they even arrived at Northlake Medical Center. We've found an excellent facility, Thaddeus continued, sliding a glossy brochure onto my tray table. Evergreen Pines Rehabilitation Center. It's only 20 minutes from my house, so Alessandra and I can visit with the twins on weekends. I stared at the brochure, the staged photos of smiling seniors in color-coordinated loungewear, tasteful beige interiors that attempted to mask the institutional reality beneath. My stomach clenched. I'm not going to a nursing home, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I'm going back to Larkspur Cottage. Thaddeus exchanged a look with Persephone. Even Quentin glanced up, his artist's hands fidgeting with the zipper of his worn leather jacket. Mother, Thaddeus sighed, dropping into the visitor's chair and leaning toward me with practiced concern. Be reasonable. You live alone in that old cottage with all those stairs. Your savings won't cover full-time care, and none of us can take months off work to babysit you. Babysit? I repeated, the word hanging bitterly in the antiseptic air. You know what he means, Persephone cut in, her tone sharp. We have lives, Mother. Thad has the merger. I'm launching my wellness brand next month, and Quentin has. She paused, searching for something substantial in her brother's artistic endeavors. His exhibition. Quentin flinched slightly, but didn't contradict her. I understand you all have commitments, I conceded, adjusting myself carefully against the pillows. The movement sent lightning bolts of pain down my spine. But I have resources you don't know about. I can hire someone. Thaddeus let out a short, dismissive laugh. Mother, we've been over your finances with Jasper. The cottage is practically your only asset, and it needs significant repairs itself. The property taxes alone are eating through what's left of Dad's insurance money. Jasper Collier. my late husband's brother and self-appointed financial advisor to the family. Of course, he'd been conferring with my children about my finances, without my knowledge or consent. When exactly did you discuss my private financial matters with your uncle? I asked, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling beneath. Last week, after your surgery. Quentin finally spoke, his voice soft. Uncle Jasper called a family meeting. He's worried about you. We all are. I see. The betrayal stung worse than my surgical wound. And it didn't occur to any of you to include me in this discussion? You were under heavy medication, Thaddeus replied smoothly. We needed to make practical decisions quickly. The social worker needs our plan before discharge, which could be as early as tomorrow. I looked at each of my children, these strangers wearing familiar faces. How had we drifted so far apart? When had they stopped seeing me as a person with agency and started viewing me as a problem to be managed? In that moment, I made my decision. I'll sign myself out tomorrow morning, I declared. Zach will pick me up and take me home. That's completely irresponsible, Thaddeus snapped, the veneer of concern cracking. You're being stubborn and childish. What I'm being is an adult who gets to make her own choices. I pressed the nurse call button. I think it's time for you all to leave. I need to rest. Persephone rolled her eyes dramatically. Classic mother, making everything more difficult than it needs to be. As they gathered their designer coats and expensive bags, Thaddeus paused at the door. We're trying to help you. You've always been independent to a fault, but you're not 30 anymore. You need to accept that you're... He hesitated. A burden? I supplied, the word hanging in the sterile air between us. He didn't deny it. After they left, I lay in the darkened hospital room, staring at the ceiling. Tears slid silently down my temples into my hair. Not tears of sadness or self-pity, but of pure, clarifying rage. For 35 years, I had centered my existence around those three human beings. I had dimmed my light, hidden my accomplishments, minimized my ambitions, all to protect their father's fragile ego and later to avoid making my children feel inadequate by comparison. When Dr. Koh returned to check my vitals, she found me with my phone pressed to my ear. Zach, I said when he answered, I need your help, and I need you to keep a secret. The next morning, against medical advice but within my rights, I checked myself out of Northlake Medical Center. Dr. Koh reluctantly provided detailed home care instructions and prescriptions, extracting a promise that I would attend all follow-up appointments. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This is against my recommendation, Marlowe, she said sternly, handing me her personal card. But I understand the desire to recover in your own space. Call me directly if anything feels wrong. Anything. I nodded gratefully, touched by her concern. When Zachariah Sterling pulled up in his faded emerald F-150, exactly as Persephone had described it, I felt the first genuine smile cross my face in days. Zach had been my friend since before the children were born, a constant through Harlan's mood swings and later, through widowhood. He helped me to the passenger seat with the gentle efficiency of someone who understood both pride and pain. Ready to disappear for a while, Marley? He asked, using the nickname only he was permitted to use. More than ready, I confirmed as we pulled away from the hospital. Did you make the arrangements? Everything's set at Whispering Pines. The caretaker's cottage is prepped with all the medical equipment you'll need. Fridge is stocked, bedrooms on the main floor, and I hired that nurse, Imani, like you asked. She'll be there 3 times a week, more if you need it. Relief flooded through me. Whispering Pines Estate was my sanctuary, a property few people knew I owned. Nestled in the mountains about 2 hours from the city, it had been my first major real estate investment after Harlan's death, purchased through my shell company, Phoenix Holdings. My children had no idea it existed. What about the calls? I asked, thinking of the inevitable moment when Thaddeus would realize I hadn't gone to Larkspur Cottage. Got that covered, too. I hired a service to answer your home phone at the cottage. They'll say you're resting and can't come to the phone, and I've got your smartphone right here. He patted his jacket pocket. We'll keep it powered down except for our scheduled calls. I leaned back against the seat, careful of my tender spine. Thank you, Zach. I don't know what I'd do without you. His weathered face creased with a smile. You'd figure something out. You always do. But Marley, are you sure about this? Cutting them off completely seems harsh. I watched the cityscape of Cascadia Heights recede in the side mirror, the gleaming glass towers giving way to suburban sprawl and eventually the dense pine forests of the mountain highway. I'm not cutting them off, I said quietly. I'm letting them experience the consequences of their choices. They've decided I'm a burden, Zach, an inconvenient responsibility to be managed. Maybe they need to think I'm gone to realize I was ever there. Zach didn't respond, but his silence was understanding rather than judgmental. He'd been there after Harlan died, when my husband's will revealed that he'd left everything to the children in trusts, with only Larkspur Cottage and a modest stipend for me. It was Zach who had encouraged me to use my architectural knowledge to identify undervalued properties, Zach who had done the initial renovations that allowed me to flip my first investment for a surprising profit, and it was Zach who had kept my growing real estate portfolio secret at my request, understanding my complex reasons for hiding my success from my children. As we wound up the mountain road toward Whispering Pines, pain medication dulling both my physical discomfort and the edges of my consciousness, I drifted in and out of sleep. My mind replayed fragments of memory. Thaddeus's first steps, Persephone's high school graduation, Quentin's first art show. When had my bright, loving children transformed into these cold, calculating adults? Had they always been this way, and I'd been too blind to see it? Or had I somehow failed them by not revealing my true self? We're here. Zach's gentle voice pulled me from my thoughts as the truck rolled to a stop. Through the windshield, I could see the caretaker's cottage, a charming, single-story stone building with a wide, covered porch. Beyond it, partially obscured by towering pines, stood the main house of the estate, a grand craftsman masterpiece I'd rescued from demolition and lovingly restored over 5 years. As Zach helped me carefully from the truck, my phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, checking the screen. It's Thaddeus, he said. Third call in the last hour. I took a deep breath of crisp mountain air. Let it go to voicemail. The disappearing act has begun. For the next 3 weeks, I focused entirely on healing. Imani, the home health nurse, was a blessing, competent, kind, and refreshingly direct. She supervised my physical therapy exercises, monitored my incision, and adjusted my medications with professional efficiency. By the end of the first month, I was able to walk short distances without the walker, though the back brace remained. A constant companion. During this time, my children's reactions to my disappearance followed a predictable pattern. First came the angry voicemails demanding I call them back. Then concerned texts about my irresponsible behavior. Finally, Thaddeus left a message stating they had filed a missing persons report, only to be told by police that a competent adult choosing not to contact family wasn't a crime. Zach kept me updated on their escalating actions. They'd visited Larkspur Cottage repeatedly, growing increasingly frustrated with the answering service's vague responses. Eventually, they'd gotten a spare key from Jasper and entered the house, only to find it empty but undisturbed, with no indication of where I might have gone. Persephone's posting about you on social media now, Zach reported during his weekly visit, scrolling through his phone, asking if anyone has seen her elderly mother who might be confused after surgery. She's included a rather unflattering photo of you from Harlan's funeral. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Suddenly, I'm important enough to warrant a public search? They're getting desperate, Zach agreed. But Marley, how long do you plan to keep this up? It's been over a month. I gazed out the cottage window at the magnificent main house, its windows reflecting the late afternoon sunlight. Dr. Ko says I'm healing faster than expected. Another month, maybe 6 weeks. I want to be fully mobile when I make my grand re-entry. And then what? Zach asked, the question hanging between us like morning mist. I turned to face my oldest friend, determination hardening my resolve. Then I show them exactly who I am. No more hiding, no more diminishing myself. It's time my children meet their real mother. By the end of the second month, Dr. Ko, who had agreed to make house calls to Whispering Pines after I explained my situation, declared my recovery remarkable for someone your age. The back brace was discarded, replaced by a more flexible support for occasional use. I could walk the perimeter of the estate and climb stairs carefully. More importantly, I could drive again, regaining the independence that had always been vital to my sense of self. During my convalescence, I hadn't been idle. Between physical therapy sessions and rest periods, I had been on conference calls with my property managers, reviewing financials, and finalizing the acquisition of a promising mixed-use building in the revitalized Embarcadero district, the same area where I'd fallen. Phoenix Holdings was thriving, and I was ready to emerge from the shadows. It was time to set the second phase of my plan in motion. Would you like me to be there? Zachy asked as he helped me pack my things for the return to Larkspur Cottage. I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. But thank you. For everything. He squeezed my hand briefly. You've always been stronger than anyone gave you credit for, Marley, even yourself. The drive back to Cascadia Heights felt like crossing a threshold. The woman who had been carried away from Northlake Medical Center was not the same one returning to reclaim her life. I had shed not just physical weakness, but the accommodating persona I'd worn for decades. Larkspur Cottage looked exactly as I'd left it, perched on its hillside overlooking the bay, its weathered blue shutters and stone facade comforting in their familiarity. I parked in the driveway, noting that the garden had been meticulously maintained in my absence, Zach's doing, no doubt. Inside, a fine layer of dust covered the surfaces, but otherwise all was as I had left it. I moved through the rooms, reconnecting with the space before settling at the antique desk in the study. I picked up the landline and dialed. Thaddeus Everhart's office, answered his assistant's crisp voice. This is Marlo Everhart. Please tell my son I'm home. The silence on the other end was satisfying. Mrs. Everhart, we've been so worried. I'll connect you immediately. A moment later, Thaddeus's voice exploded through the receiver. Mother, where the hell have you been? We've been out of our minds with worry. Have you? I asked calmly. How interesting. I'd like you and your siblings to come to Larkspur Cottage tonight at 7. We have matters to discuss. Mother, you can't just disappear for 2 months and then expect us to— 7 o'clock, Thaddeus. Don't be late. I hung up before he could respond. Similar conversations with Persephone and Quentin followed. Both expressed outrage at my disappearance, though Quentin's concern seemed more genuine than his sister's. I maintained the same calm detachment, issuing the same invitation, or rather, summons, for 7 o'clock. With those calls complete, I made one more. Dr. Ko, it's Marlo. I was wondering if you might be available for dinner this evening. There are some people I'd like you to meet. That evening, I dressed with deliberate care, charcoal silk trousers, a cashmere sweater in deep teal, a simple strand of pearls. I applied makeup for the first time since the surgery, not to hide my age, but to accentuate the strength in my features. As I secured my silver hair in its usual chignon, I studied my reflection. The woman looking back at me had clear eyes and a determined set to her jaw. At precisely 6:57, the first car pulled into the driveway, Quentin's battered Volvo. He had always been punctual, a trait he'd inherited from me rather than his chronically late father. Through the window, I watched him approach the front door, his tall frame hunched slightly as if perpetually apologetic for taking up space. He rang the bell instead of using his key, an acknowledgement that something fundamental had changed. I opened the door, standing straight and tall. "Mother," he breathed, relief washing over his expressive face. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and embraced me, then quickly pulled back. "I'm sorry. You're back." "It's all right," I assured him, returning the hug briefly. "I'm much better now. Come in." We had barely reached the living room when Persephone's BMW pulled up, followed almost immediately by Thaddeus's Range Rover. Within minutes, all three of my children stood in my living room, their expressions ranging from relief to lingering anger. "Where have you been?" Thaddeus demanded, his authoritative tone belied by the uncertainty in his eyes. "We filed police reports, hired private investigators." "I was recovering," I answered simply, as I had every right to do, in a location of my choosing. "You could have told us," Persephone exclaimed, waving her manicured hands dramatically. "We thought you were dead in a ditch somewhere." "Did you?" I asked, studying her carefully. "How inconvenient that would have been for you." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Quentin shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Mother," he began hesitantly, "we were worried. Genuinely worried." "Were you worried when you called me dead weight, Thaddeus?" I asked, turning to my eldest. "Were you concerned about my well-being when you decided, without consulting me, that I should be placed in a facility? Were any of you thinking about what I wanted, what I needed, or were you simply problem-solving your burdensome mother?" The doorbell rang before any of them could respond. "That would be my dinner guest," I said, moving to answer it. Dr. Valencia. Co stood on the porch, elegant in a simple sheath dress, a bottle of wine in hand. "Dr. Co?" Thaddeus recognized her immediately. "What are you doing here?" "I invited her," I explained, taking the wine and ushering her inside. "Valencia has been instrumental in my recovery." "You've been with her this whole time?" Persephone asked incredulously. "No," Dr. Co answered before I could. "But I have been monitoring your mother's recovery at her private residence. A recovery that, I might add, has been remarkable. Likely because she was in an environment where she felt safe and valued." The pointed comment hung in the air like a rebuke. "Please, everyone, let's sit down," I suggested, gesturing toward the dining room where I had set the table earlier. "We have much to discuss." As my children filed into the dining room, their confusion evident, I exchanged a knowing glance with Valencia. The evening was just beginning, and so was their education. The real revelation would come tomorrow, when I would take them to see exactly what their burden of a mother had built while they weren't paying attention. My real estate empire was about to be unveiled, and with it, the woman I had kept hidden for far too long. Dinner was a masterclass in restrained tension. I had prepared a simple meal, poached salmon, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread from the local bakery, arranged on the heirloom china that had belonged to Harlan's grandmother. My children picked at their food, exchanging uneasy glances across the table while Dr. Valencia Co maintained a pleasant professional demeanor. "So, you've been checking on Mother at some secret location?" Thaddeus finally asked, directing his question to Valencia while barely looking at me. "I've been making house calls to your mother at her request," Valencia replied, her tone measured. "As her physician, I'm bound by confidentiality, but I can tell you that her recovery has been excellent. The environment was ideal. Quiet, stress-free, with appropriate medical support." "And you couldn't have told us this was your plan?" Persephone interjected, turning to me with accusation flashing in her eyes. "Do you have any idea what we've been through? The police thought we were overreacting. Thad's assistant had to reschedule half his meetings for those first weeks. I had to postpone my brand launch. I took a sip of water, letting her words hang in the air. How inconvenient for you all. Quentin, who had been silent until now, set down his fork. We were worried, Mother. Truly worried. His voice held a sincerity that the others lacked, but even Quentin had stood by while his siblings labeled me a burden. Even he had failed to speak up when they planned to ship me off to Evergreen Pines. Were you? I asked, meeting his gaze directly. Or were you concerned about the complications my injury created in your lives? No one answered. The clink of silverware against china filled the uncomfortable silence. You had no right, Thaddeus finally declared, his corporate authority voice emerging. Uncle Jasper has been beside himself. He's been trying to access your accounts to make sure your bills were being paid, but without power of attorney, his hands were tied. I smiled thinly. How unfortunate for Jasper. Thaddeus's eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means, my son, that Jasper Collier has no business accessing any of my financial information, and never has. I folded my napkin, deliberately, and placed it beside my plate. Which brings us to the reason I've asked you all here tonight. Tomorrow morning I would like you to meet me at the office building on 7th and Madison downtown, 10 o'clock sharp. What office building? Persephone asked, frowning. The Prism Tower? Do you know it? Recognition flickered across Thaddeus's face. The new mixed-use development? 26 floors, LEED certified? That curved glass facade? What business do you have there? That's precisely what I intend to show you, I replied. Valencia will be joining us, as well as my friend Zachariah Sterling, whom you've all met. The handyman, Persephone muttered. Among other things, I acknowledged smoothly. Now shall we have dessert? I've made lemon tart. As I rose to clear the dinner plates, Valencia immediately stood to help. Quentin hesitantly joined us, while Thaddeus and Persephone remained seated, confusion and frustration evident in their postures. In the kitchen, Valencia squeezed my arm gently. You're doing wonderfully, she murmured. How's your back holding up? Surprisingly well, I admitted, though I might need one of those muscle relaxants before bed. Quentin appeared in the doorway, carrying the remaining plates. I can help with that, he offered awkwardly. With whatever you need, Mother. I studied my youngest child, the sensitive one, the artist, the one who had always been a bit out of step with his more ambitious siblings. There was genuine remorse in his eyes. Thank you, Quentin, I said, softly. I appreciate that. After dessert and coffee, my children departed with obvious reluctance, their curiosity about tomorrow's meeting overshadowing their lingering resentment. Valencia stayed behind to check my incision and ensure I was comfortable before heading home herself. Are you certain about tomorrow? She asked as she gathered her medical bag. It's a lot all at once, physically and emotionally. I sank into my favorite armchair, feeling the day's exertions in every muscle. I'm sure it's time they knew, all of it. Valencia nodded, understanding the weight of my decision. Call me if you need anything before tomorrow, even just to talk. After she left, I sat alone in the quiet house, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of the old structure. Larkspur Cottage had been my home for 35 years. The only thing Harlan had left me outright when he died, perhaps out of guilt for his numerous infidelities, perhaps because he genuinely believed it was all I deserved or could manage. The cottage was modest by Cascadia Heights standards, a 3-bedroom stone house perched on a hillside overlooking the bay. When we'd purchased it as newlyweds, it had been a stretch financially, but as Harlan's architectural firm grew successful, he began to view it as quaint but embarrassingly small. He'd repeatedly suggested selling it for something more impressive, but I had always refused. I loved its character, its proximity to the water, the way light flooded the kitchen in the mornings. What Harlan never understood was that I saw potential everywhere, in buildings, in neighborhoods, in people. My architectural training had taught me to look beyond surface flaws to structural foundations. After his death, I had applied that same vision to real estate investments, identifying undervalued properties that could be transformed with the right renovations. Starting with just $50,000, money I'd quietly saved from my household allowance over the years, I'd purchased my first property, a neglected duplex in what was then an overlooked neighborhood. Zach had helped me renovate it on a shoestring budget, and 6 months later, I sold it for twice my investment. I poured everything back into the next property, then the next. 15 years later, Phoenix Holdings owned 37 properties across 3 states, with the crown jewel being the Prism Tower, a gleaming testament to sustainable design and community-focused development. And tomorrow, my children would finally learn who their mother really was. I woke before dawn, more from anticipation than discomfort. After a careful series of stretching exercises that Valencia had prescribed, I dressed with deliberate care. Tailored charcoal pantsuit, comfortable yet elegant heels, the custom jade pendant Zach had given me for my 55th birthday. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a successful businesswoman, not the faded homemaker my children perceived. Zach arrived at 9, leaning against his ancient green truck with 2 cups of coffee from our favorite local roaster. "Ready? For the grand unveiling?" he asked, handing me the stronger of the 2 brews. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a grateful sip. "Are the conference room preparations complete?" He nodded, his weathered face crinkling with a smile. "Everything's set up exactly as you wanted. The team is excited to finally meet the Everhart children they've heard so much about." "I'm not sure excited is quite the right word," I mused, as we got into his truck. "Curious, perhaps, like scientists observing particularly disappointing specimens." Zach chuckled. "You've built a loyal team, Marley. They're protective of you, especially after these past few months." The drive downtown was filled with comfortable silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. As we approached the Prism Tower, I felt a flutter of nervous pride. The building's distinctive curved glass facade caught the morning sunlight, sending prismatic reflections across the surrounding plaza, where a small urban garden and seating area welcomed pedestrians. We pulled into the underground parking garage, where a reserved space marked M. Everhart CEO awaited. The private elevator required a keycard that Zach swiped, and we ascended directly to the 26th floor, the executive level of Phoenix Holdings. Evelyn, my chief of operations, greeted us as the doors opened. A former commercial real estate broker who had joined my team 10 years ago, she had become indispensable to Phoenix's growth. "They're all here," she informed me, falling into step beside us as we walked toward the conference room. "Arrived about 15 minutes ago. Dr. Coe is with them." "And Jasper?" I asked, knowing he would inevitably insert himself into the situation. Evelyn's lips thinned with distaste. "Called twice this morning. Said he was concerned about the family's interests." I told him this was a private meeting. "He'll show up anyway," Zach predicted. "He always does when he smells money." "Let him," I said, squaring my shoulders as we reached the frosted glass doors of the conference room. It's time everyone understood exactly where things stand. Evelyn squeezed my arm supportively before peeling off toward her office. Zach held the door for me, and I entered the space I had designed myself, a bright, airy room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, a massive reclaimed wood table at its center. My 3 children and Valencia looked up simultaneously. Thaddeus and Persephone sat rigidly in their chairs, while Quentin had been examining the architectural models displayed along one wall. Valencia offered me a warm smile from her seat near the head of the table. "Mother," Thaddeus began immediately, rising to his feet. "What is the meaning of this? The receptionist treated us like we were expected. She knew our names." "Because you were expected," I replied calmly, taking my place at the head of the table. And you are known here. Known where exactly? Persephone demanded, gesturing around the elegant space. What is this place, and why is he here? She glanced dismissively at Zach, who had taken a seat to my right. This, I said, is the headquarters of Phoenix Holdings, a real estate development and investment company founded 15 years ago. I paused, watching comprehension slowly dawn on their faces. My company. Silence fell over the room, thick and stunned. That's not possible, Thaddeus finally said, his brow furrowed in confusion. Uncle Jasper manages all the family finances. He would have mentioned, Jasper manages the trusts your father established for each of you, I corrected him. He has never managed my money. Phoenix Holdings is entirely separate from the Everhart family trusts. But Persephone looked around the luxurious space, clearly struggling to reconcile this reality with her perception of me. How? With what money? I started small, I explained. A duplex in Riverside District back when it was still considered undesirable. Then, a small commercial space in Harbor Square. Each success funded the next investment. You're saying you've been secretly running a real estate company for 15 years? Thaddeus asked, incredulity sharpening his tone. That's absurd. You were a housewife. You volunteered at garden clubs and hosted Dad's firm parties. I was also a licensed architect who graduated top of my class at Barrett Institute before I met your father, I reminded him mildly. A fact that seems to have been forgotten. I didn't forget, Quentin said quietly from where he stood by. The models. You helped design my treehouse. You taught me how to read blueprints. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I glimpsed the sweet, thoughtful boy he had once been. Phoenix Holdings currently owns 37 properties. Across 3 states, I continued. This building is our newest acquisition and headquarters. We specialize in sustainable development with a focus on community integration and affordable housing components. 37 properties? Persephone repeated, her voice faint. How much? I mean, what is the company worth? Before I could answer, the conference room door swung open, and Jasper Collier strode in with the entitled confidence of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. At 62, he still maintained the athlete's build from his college rowing days, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his tailored suit a declaration of wealth and status. Marlowe, he acknowledged tersely before turning to my children. I came as soon as Thaddeus texted me. What's this about a real estate company? Uncle Jasper? Thaddeus began, relief evident in his voice. Mother is claiming she owns some kind of property development firm. She says she's been running it secretly, for years. Jasper's gaze darted around the room, taking in the obvious quality of the furnishings, the impressive view, the company logo emblazoned on the wall behind me, a stylized phoenix in gradient shades of amber and gold. This is preposterous, he declared finally. Marlowe, what game are you playing? Harlan left you provided for, but not with the kind of capital needed to build. Whatever this is supposed to be. No game, Jasper, I replied evenly. Phoenix Holdings is very real, as is my ownership of it. Zach, would you distribute the information packets, please? Zach rose and placed sleek folders before each person at the table. Inside were comprehensive breakdowns of Phoenix Holdings' portfolio, financial statements for the past 5 years, and a detailed organizational chart showing me at the top, with Evelyn, Zach, and 23 other employees in various roles beneath. The company is currently valued at approximately $127 million, I stated as they flipped through the documents. Last year's profit was $8.2 million, which was reinvested in our newest acquisition, the former Westridge manufacturing site which we're converting to mixed-income housing. Thaddeus's head snapped up from the financial statements he was scrutinizing. These numbers can't be right. I assure you they are, Valencia spoke up. I've been Marlowe's partner in the Westridge project. My medical group is establishing a community clinic on the ground floor. Partner? Jasper echoed, his complexion reddening. Marlowe, you can't possibly have the expertise to manage holdings of this magnitude. Clearly someone has taken advantage of you. This requires immediate investigation. That won't be necessary, I cut him off. Phoenix has been audited twice by independent firms. Our books are immaculate, our business practices above reproach. Evelyn runs a tight ship. Who the hell is Evelyn? Jasper demanded. As if on cue, the door opened and Evelyn entered carrying a tablet. In her early 50s, with a precisely cut bob and sharp eyes that missed nothing, she had the confident bearing of someone who excelled at her job. The quarterly projections you requested, she said, placing the tablet before me. And Mr. Sterling, the contractors are ready for your call about the Embarcadero renovations whenever you're free. Thank you, Evelyn, I said. Please meet my children, Thaddeus, Persephone, and Quentin, and my brother-in-law, Jasper Collier. Evelyn surveyed them with cool professionalism. Welcome to Phoenix Holdings. We've heard so much about you all. Her tone made it clear that what she'd heard hadn't been entirely positive. Persephone, who had been uncharacteristically silent, suddenly found her voice. Mother, why keep this secret? Why pretend to be? I don't know. Just a widow living on Dad's charity? It was the question I'd been waiting for, the one that cut to the heart of everything. Initially, it was practical, I explained. Your father never respected my professional abilities. When we married, he made it clear that his career came first, that my role was to support him and raise you children. After he died, I found freedom in anonymity. No one expected anything from Marlowe Everhart, the architect who gave up her career. But they respected Phoenix Holdings. I paused, meeting each of their gazes in turn. As time passed, I realized this separation served another purpose. It showed me who valued me for myself, and who saw only what I could provide them. It became a test, one that unfortunately most people failed. Quentin moved slowly back to the table and sank into a chair. Including us, he said softly. We failed your test. You did, I acknowledged, feeling no pleasure in the admission. When I needed support after my surgery, you saw me as a burden, an inconvenience to be managed, not a person to be helped. That's unfair, Thaddeus protested, though his voice lacked conviction. We were trying to be practical. You needed care that we couldn't provide. I needed respect, I corrected him. I needed to be consulted about my own life, not dictated to. And yes, I needed help, but help offered with love, not resentment. This is ridiculous, Jasper interjected. Whatever you've built here, Marlowe, doesn't change the fact that you disappeared for months without a word, worrying your family sick. That was selfish and irresponsible. Was it? I turned to him, allowing decades of suppressed anger to sharpen my words. Or was it the first truly healthy decision I've made in years? To remove myself from people who saw me as nothing but a problem to solve? Jasper scoffed, but Zach leaned forward, his normally gentle demeanor hardening. You know what's selfish, Collier. Treating Marley like she's incompetent for 30 years. Convincing her kids that she needs to be managed rather than respected. That's what's selfish. You stay out of this, Sterling, Jasper snapped. You're just the handyman who's been hanging around for years. We all know why. Zach stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I've been hanging around because, unlike you, I actually see Marlowe. I see her brilliance, her kindness, her strength. I see the woman who built an empire while you were trying to control the pittance Harlan left her. Zach, I said quietly, placing a hand on his arm. It's all right. The room fell silent again, the tension palpable. Valencia, who had observed the exchange with clinical detachment, finally spoke. Perhaps it would be helpful to focus on the present rather than past grievances. Marlo has recovered well from her surgery. She's clearly capable of managing her affairs, and she's revealed a significant achievement that deserves acknowledgement. Persephone shifted uncomfortably in her chair. So, all this time you've been wealthy? You didn't need our help at all? Financial help? No, I admitted. But family support? Care? Respect? Those I did need, and still do. Why reveal everything now? Thaddeus asked, his analytical mind clearly trying to make sense of this new reality. You could have continued your double life. The accident changed things, I explained. It made me realize how fragile life is, how quickly everything can change. I'm 60 years old. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left hiding who I am from the people who should know me best. I turned a page in the information packet, directing their attention to a series of architectural renderings. These are preliminary designs for the Harlan Everhart Memorial Arts Center, part of our Embarcadero District revitalization. Quentin, I was hoping you might consult on the gallery spaces. They should be designed with working artists in mind, not just for showing completed work. Quentin's eyes widened, his gaze moving from the renderings to my face. You want my input? Of course. You're the only actual artist in the family. Your perspective would be invaluable. For the first time since they'd arrived, a genuine smile transformed his face. I'd like that, Mother. This is all very touching, Jasper interrupted, but there are serious legal and financial implications to consider. The family, trusts, remain exactly as they are, I finished for him. Phoenix Holdings has nothing to do with Harlan's estate or the trusts he established. It's entirely separate. Convenient, he muttered. No, Jasper. Strategic. I fixed him with a steady gaze. I learned from watching you and Harlan. I learned that power concealed is sometimes more effective than power flaunted. I learned that people reveal their true selves when they think you have nothing to offer them. I closed my folder and stood, signaling that the meeting was concluding. I have another appointment shortly, but I wanted you all to know the truth. Phoenix Holdings exists. It's successful, and it's mine. You can choose to be part of my life knowing this truth, or you can continue to see me as the burdensome mother who needs managing. The choice is yours. Jasper was the first to leave, storming out with barely contained fury. Thaddeus followed shortly after, mumbling something about needing time to process. Persephone lingered, her perfectly manicured nails drumming anxiously on the folder before her. I said terrible things, she finally admitted, not quite meeting my eyes. When you were in the hospital and after, I was cruel. Yes, I agreed, offering neither absolution nor condemnation. You were. She nodded jerkily, gathered her designer handbag, and left without another word. Only Quentin remained, still studying the Art Center renderings with genuine interest. The natural light in this north gallery is brilliant, he observed. And these movable walls for reconfiguring the space, that's exactly what emerging artists need. I thought so too, I said, moving to stand beside him. The architect incorporated my suggestions, but I'd value your professional opinion on the final design. He looked up at me, his artist's eyes searching my face. You really want me involved, after how I failed you? You're my son, Quentin. That hasn't changed. And yes, you hurt me deeply. But of all my children, you're the one who seemed to struggle most with the family's treatment of me. Perhaps we can start fresh. I'd like that, he said softly. And Mother? What you've built here, it's extraordinary, truly. After Quentin departed, promising to return the following week to discuss the Art Center in detail, I sank into my chair, suddenly exhausted. Valencia approached, her medical instincts clearly triggered by my pallor. You've overdone it, she observed. pressing cool fingers to my wrist to check my pulse. Your heart is racing. It's been a long morning, I acknowledged, but a necessary one. Zach returned from seeing Quentin to the elevator. Well, that went about as expected. Jasper looked like he might have a stroke. A small, vindictive part of me couldn't help but take satisfaction in that image. He'll recover. His ego always does. And the children? Valencia asked, perching on the edge of the conference table. Thaddeus will analyze everything to death, looking for angles and implications. Persephone will be mortified that she misjudged my financial situation so badly. And Quentin? I smiled faintly. Quentin might actually be okay, eventually. And you? Zach asked, his concern evident. How are you feeling, Marley? I gazed out at the spectacular view of Cascadia Bay, at the city I had quietly helped shape over 15 years of strategic investments and thoughtful development. My body ached from the morning's exertions, but beneath the physical discomfort lay a profound sense of liberation. I feel, I said slowly, like I've finally stepped into the light, and whatever happens next, at least it will be honest. Valencia nodded approvingly. Transparency is generally healthier than secrecy, for buildings and for people. Speaking of health, Zach interjected, you need rest. Doctor's orders, right, Valencia? Absolutely. Back to Larkspur Cottage for at least a few hours of horizontal recovery. I allowed them to help me gather my things, secretly grateful for their support. The morning had been more emotionally draining than I'd anticipated, and my surgically repaired spine was protesting the extended sitting. As we rode the elevator down to the parking garage, I reflected on how different my support system looked from what I had once imagined. Not my children, not my husband's family, but these two people who had seen my value without needing proof of my accomplishments. Lunch first, I decided as we reached Zach's truck. I'm suddenly starving. How about that Vietnamese place on Harbor Street? Pho sounds perfect, Valencia agreed. Restorative, and we can debrief about this morning. And plan our next move, Zach added, holding the passenger door for me. Because knowing your children, and especially Jasper, this is just the opening salvo. He was right, of course. Today had been a revelation, but it was only the beginning. The real test would be what happened next, how my family chose to respond now that they knew the truth about who I really was. As we pulled away from the Prism Tower, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the side mirror. Straight-backed, clear-eyed, unmistakably the CEO of Phoenix Holdings, rather than just Harlan Everhart's widow. For the first time in decades, the inner and outer versions of myself aligned perfectly. Whatever came next, I would face it as my authentic self. It had taken a broken spine to give me the backbone I'd always needed. The irony wasn't lost on me. The aftermath of my revelation unfolded gradually over the following weeks, like ripples spreading across still water. After our confrontational meeting at the Prism Tower, my children responded in ways that were both predictable and surprising. Thaddeus, ever the strategist, retreated to analyze the situation. For 10 days, he maintained radio silence. No calls, no texts, not even his usual terse emails about family business matters. When he finally reached out, it was with a carefully worded request to tour some of Phoenix Holdings' properties. Professional curiosity, he claimed, though we both knew it was more complicated than that. I agreed, and on a misty Tuesday morning, Zach and I took him to 3 of our developments, the revitalized Embarcadero District retail spaces, a mid-sized apartment complex that offered subsidized units for teachers and first responders, and finally, Whispering Pines Estate, my sanctuary. During recovery, as we walked the grounds of Whispering Pines, Thaddeus finally asked the question I'd been expecting. Why didn't you ever tell Dad about any of this? I paused beside a Japanese maple tree I'd planted 5 years earlier, its crimson leaves vibrant against the evergreen backdrop. Your father didn't want a business partner, Thad. He wanted an admiring audience. Our marriage functioned because I played my assigned role. Thaddeus frowned, his expression so reminiscent of Harlan's disapproval that I nearly laughed. That's a rather cynical view of your marriage. Is it? Your father was brilliant in many ways, but he needed to be the star of every room. When we were first married, I suggested a minor improvement to one of his designs, an adjustment to the natural light in a living space. He didn't speak to me for 3 days. Dad wouldn't. He did. I kept my voice gentle but firm. After that, I learned to phrase my ideas as questions, to let him believe insights were his own. It was easier that way. Thaddeus fell silent, processing this perspective on his father that contradicted his idealized memories. Was anything between you two real? He finally asked, vulnerability briefly cracking his polished exterior. I touched his arm lightly. We loved each other, in our way, and we both loved you children fiercely. But we were products of our generation. Your father expected certain things from a wife, and for a long time, I accepted those limitations. Until he died, Thaddeus observed. Until I decided my own dreams mattered too, I corrected him. It just happened to coincide with his death. We continued walking, the conversation shifting to more neutral territory, property values, investment strategies, Phoenix Holdings' management structure. Thaddeus asked intelligent, probing questions that revealed both his financial acumen and his struggle to reconcile this new image of his mother with the woman who had packed his lunches and attended his soccer games. As we parted that afternoon, he hesitated before getting into his Range Rover. I've been unfair to you, he admitted. Stiffly, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. I made assumptions about your capabilities that were inaccurate. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Thaddeus it was significant. We all make assumptions, I replied. The question is whether we're willing to revise them when presented with new information. He nodded sharply, then surprised me by asking, Would you be available for dinner next Thursday? Alessandra has been asking about you since she heard you were back. The twins, too. I hadn't seen my daughter-in-law or granddaughters in nearly 3 months. The invitation, however awkwardly extended, felt like an olive branch. I'd like that very much. Persephone's response was dramatically different. 2 days after the ED Prism Tower meeting, she appeared at Larkspur Cottage unannounced, armed with a lavish gift basket from an exclusive spa and a demeanor that swung between contrition and calculated charm. "Mother, darling," she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheeks in the European style she'd adopted after a semester abroad in Milan. "You look absolutely radiant. That suit at the meeting was divine. Is it Armani? I should have known you'd have impeccable taste in business attire." I accepted the gift basket with appropriate thanks, but waited for the real purpose behind her visit to emerge. Persephone had never been one for subtlety. Beneath her effusive compliments lay an agenda that would reveal itself soon enough. It took exactly 17 minutes, halfway through the tea I'd prepared. "So I've been thinking," she began, delicately setting down her cup. "My wellness brand, Persephone's Bounty, is gaining significant traction with our target demographic. The investor response has been enthusiastic, but we're facing a challenge with our physical space." "Oh?" I kept my expression neutral, though I'd already researched her fledgling company and knew exactly what she was about to ask. "We've outgrown our current location. It's a charming converted loft, but we need room for expansion. Ideally, we need a flagship store that can also house our content studio, wellness consultation spaces, and a small inventory warehouse." "Sounds like quite the operation," I observed mildly. "It is." Her eyes lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "We're pioneering an integrative approach to wellness that combines nutrition, mindfulness, and clean beauty. But commercial real estate in desirable areas is outrageously expensive right now." She paused, watching me expectantly. When I didn't immediately offer to solve her problem, she continued, I was thinking, since you obviously have so much experience in commercial properties, perhaps Phoenix Holdings might have something suitable? Or you could advise me on negotiating terms. There it was, the request lurking beneath the flattery and reconnection attempts. Not an apology for calling me dead weight or suggesting I should be warehoused in a care facility, but a business proposition. Phoenix Holdings does have several properties that might suit your needs, I acknowledged. But I need to be clear about something, Persephone. Any arrangement between us would be strictly business, fair market rates, standard contracts, no special treatment. Her perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of wounded innocence. Of course, Mother, I wouldn't dream of asking for special treatment. I just thought, well, families supporting families' endeavors is natural, isn't it? It is, I agreed, and I support your entrepreneurial spirit, but respect should flow both ways. A flush crept up her neck. If this is about what happened, after your surgery, it's about establishing healthy boundaries, I interrupted gently. I'm proud of what you're building, Seth. I want to see you succeed, and I'm happy to introduce you to Evelyn, who can show you several potential spaces. But our personal relationship needs healing before we entangle our business interests. Something flickered across her face, frustration, disappointment, perhaps even a flash of genuine remorse. But Persephone had always been adept at pivoting when her initial strategy failed. You're absolutely right, she conceded, reaching for my hand across the table. I've been insensitive. Of course we need to repair our relationship first. In fact, that's why I'm really here. The business thing just came up. I squeezed her hand, not quite believing her but appreciating the effort nonetheless. Why? Don't we start with a proper lunch next week? Just us catching up. No business talk. Perfect, she exclaimed with characteristic exuberance. There's this divine new place in Harbor Square, farm to table, absolutely Instagram-worthy interiors. As she chattered about the restaurant's acclaimed chef and her own latest social media campaign, I observed my middle child with bittersweet clarity. Persephone had always been the most like Harlan, charismatic, ambitious, slightly self-absorbed, but capable of genuine warmth when it suited her purposes. She approached relationships as transactions, a trait I'd noticed since her childhood playground negotiations. Whether she could evolve beyond that remained to be seen, but at least she was making an effort, however self-interested it might be. Quentin, true to his word, appeared at my office the following week to discuss the Arts Center designs. Unlike his siblings, his approach was direct and unvarnished. I've been a coward, he stated plainly as we spread the architectural plans across my conference table. I knew how Thad and Seth were treating you, and I said nothing, did nothing. You were caught in the middle, I acknowledged, touched by his honesty. He shook his head firmly. That's no excuse. I've spent my whole life being caught in the middle, between Dad's expectations and my own interests, between Thad's business world and my art, between what the family thinks I should be and who I actually am. I used it as an excuse to avoid conflict, to avoid standing up for what's right. There was a new steadiness in Quentin that surprised me, a quiet determination that hadn't been there before. Perhaps my own transformation had inspired his. We all make choices we later regret, I told him. The question is what we do next. What Quentin did next was throw himself into the Arts Center project with passionate dedication. His insights were invaluable. Practical suggestions about lighting, exhibition space flexibility, and what emerging artists actually needed versus what traditional galleries typically offered. We began meeting weekly, our discussions expanding. Beyond the project to include his own artistic journey, his struggles to establish himself in a competitive field, and gradually, more personal matters. During one such meeting, as we shared takeout noodles in my office after hours, He confessed something unexpected. "I broke up with Julian," he said, twirling lo mein around his chopsticks without looking up. I paused, surprised. Julian had been Quentin's partner for nearly 3 years, a talented ceramicist with a gentle manner who had always been unfailingly kind during our few meetings. "I'm sorry to hear that. May I ask why?" Quentin set down his chopsticks and met my gaze. "Because of how we treated you. After your surgery, when Thad and Seth were talking about sending you to that facility, Julian said we should at least visit different places, consider your comfort and preferences. But He swallowed hard. "I told him it wasn't his business, that we'd handle family matters ourselves." "That seems like a harsh reason to end a relationship," I observed carefully. "It wasn't just that," he explained. His reaction to my behavior made me see myself clearly for the first time in years. The person reflected in his eyes wasn't someone I wanted to be. Someone who abandoned their mother because it was convenient, who valued family approval over doing what's right. I reached across the table to cover his hand with mine. We all have moments that force us to confront difficult truths about ourselves. "Like your accident," he said quietly. "Like my accident," I agreed. "Sometimes we need to break before we can rebuild." Quentin nodded, understanding passing between us. "I called Julian yesterday," he admitted. "Asked if we could talk. He agreed to coffee next week." "I'm glad," I said sincerely. He always struck me as someone who sees you clearly and values what he sees. "Unlike most of the family," Quentin added with a wry smile. "We're working on that, aren't we?" While my children adjusted to the new reality of who their mother truly was, Jasper Collier took a predictably different approach. 3 days after our confrontation at the Prism Tower, he launched his counteroffensive. It began with a letter from his attorney requesting all financial documentation pertaining to Phoenix Holdings and its relationship to Everhart family assets. This was followed by requests for meetings with my accountant, demands to audit Phoenix's books, and increasingly transparent attempts to assert control over what he clearly viewed as assets that should have been under his management. I forwarded everything to Emmanuel Diaz, Phoenix Holdings' razor-sharp legal counsel, with a brief note. "Jasper being Jasper, handle as you see fit." Emmanuel's response was swift and devastating. Her firm dispatched a cease and desist letter outlining the complete legal separation between Phoenix Holdings and the Everhart family trusts, along with a thinly veiled threat of harassment charges if Jasper continued his fishing expedition. When legal intimidation failed, Jasper tried a different approach, showing up at Larkspur Cottage one evening under the guise of familial concern. "Marlo," he greeted me with forced cordiality when I opened the door. "We need to talk." I considered refusing him entry, but decided that confronting Jasper directly might be the quickest way to end his interference. I led him to the study, Harlan's former domain, now transformed with my architectural books, design awards, and the scale models of several Phoenix developments. "I'll be direct," Jasper began, declining my offer of tea. "I'm concerned about the children's inheritance. Their trusts remain untouched," I replied calmly. "Phoenix Holdings has no connection to Harlan's estate." "That's difficult to believe. You couldn't have built a company of that size without using family resources." I smiled thinly. "Would you like to see the paper trail, Jasper? Every investment, every loan, every property acquisition. Emmanuel has prepared a comprehensive documentation package that traces Phoenix's growth from my initial $50,000 investment. Money I saved from my household allowance over the years, by the way." Jasper's expression darkened. "This isn't about paperwork, Marlo. It's about Harlan's legacy. He entrusted me with ensuring his children's financial security. And I've done nothing to threaten that," I pointed out. "In fact, I've created additional opportunities for them should they choose to engage with Phoenix constructively." "By hiding assets from your own family?" He shook his head in disapproval. That's hardly constructive. I hid nothing. I simply built something of my own, separate from the Everhart fortune that you've guarded so zealously. I leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Jasper, what really bothers you more? That I succeeded without your knowledge? Or that you can't control what I've built? His jaw tightened. You've always been difficult, Marlowe. Harlan complained about your stubbornness for years. Did he? I kept my voice light. Interesting, since he also came to me for design advice on his most challenging projects. Of course, he presented those ideas as his own to you and the firm partners. That's absurd, Jasper scoffed. Is it? The River Heights Municipal Complex? That? Central Atrium Solution was mine. The Harrison Museum expansion, those sightlines were my suggestion. Harlan was brilliant at client relations, but we both know his technical solutions could be uninspired. Jasper's face flushed with anger. You're rewriting history to make yourself seem more important than you were. No, Jasper, I said, quietly. That's what you and Harlan did for years. I'm simply reclaiming my narrative. He left shortly after, bristling with indignation but lacking any real leverage. As I watched his Mercedes disappear down the driveway, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Jasper, like Harlan, belonged to a generation of men who measured their worth by how much they controlled. My independence threatened that worldview at its foundation. The next day, I received a surprising call from Emmeline Collier, Jasper's wife of 40 years and Harlan's sister. Might I stop by for tea? She asked, her aristocratic voice carrying its usual measured politeness. Emmeline had always been cordial to me, but we'd never been close. She operated in her husband's shadow, much as I had in Harlan's, though I'd always sensed a formidable intelligence behind her carefully maintained society wife facade. She arrived promptly at 3, elegant as always in a tailored navy dress and simple pearls. As we settled in the garden with tea and shortbread, she came directly to the point. Jasper is making a fool of himself, she stated calmly. I thought, you should know that not everyone in the family supports his campaign. I blinked, surprised by her frankness. Thank you for saying so. Emmeline stirred her tea precisely. I've watched you for 35 years, Marlowe. The quiet architect who set aside her own ambitions to support Harlan and raise those children. I always wondered when you would finally claim your own space. You knew? I asked, unable to hide my surprise. A small, enigmatic smile crossed her lips. Not about Phoenix specifically, no. But I recognized something in you, a contained energy, an observant patience. You reminded me of my mother, who managed our family's real estate interests behind the scenes while my father took all the credit. The comparison startled me. I had never known much about Emmeline's background, beyond her coming from old money, as Harlan had always described it. The Bransford portfolio, Emmeline continued, 32 commercial properties across New England. Mother expanded it to include residential developments after the war. Father presented every acquisition to his business associates as his own strategic vision. She sipped her tea. Sound familiar? Entirely, I admitted. I won't interfere. With Jasper's foolishness directly, she said. Some battles aren't worth fighting after 40 years of marriage. But I wanted you to know that I see you, Marlowe. I admire what you've built, and how you've built it. That means a great deal to me, Emmeline. Thank you. She nodded, a silent understanding passing between us. Two women who had navigated the constraints of their marriages in different ways, but with clear-eyed awareness of the compromises involved. As spring yielded to early summer, my physical recovery continued to progress beyond Dr. Koh's expectations. The back pain receded to occasional twinges, my mobility improved, and the surgical scar faded from angry red to a thin silver line. Valencia attributed my rapid healing to excellent medical care, but Zach had a different theory. "It's because you're finally standing upright in every sense," he suggested one evening, as we walked along the waterfront near Larkspur Cottage. "No more contorting yourself to fit into spaces too small for you." The metaphor resonated deeply. For decades, I had compressed my ambitions, my intelligence, my very self to accommodate first Harlan's ego, then my children's perception of me as simply their mother. The physical straightening of my spine paralleled an internal alignment that felt profoundly right. This new chapter brought professional developments as well. The Embarcadero District project accelerated as Quentin's input on the Arts Center generated excitement among local artists and community leaders. Thaddeus, to my surprise, made a thoughtful suggestion about incorporating small business incubator spaces into the development, an idea that our financial projections supported. Even Persephone contributed, albeit in her characteristic way, by featuring the project on her increasingly popular wellness blog, framing it as community-centered design for holistic urban living. My relationship with each of my children evolved tentatively in those months, not instantly repaired, but gradually rebuilding on a foundation of greater honesty and mutual respect. Thaddeus invited me to consult on a real estate investment, initiative his firm was considering, acknowledging my expertise in an area he had previously dismissed. Persephone began asking genuine questions about my business journey, seemingly inspired by my late-in-life success as she navigated her own entrepreneurial path. And Quentin, whose artistic soul had always made him most attuned to emotional undercurrents, simply spent more time with me, working on the Arts Center, sharing meals, occasionally bringing Julian, with whom he had cautiously reconciled. Not everything changed, of course. Jasper continued his campaign of legal harassment until Emmanuel filed for a restraining order, effectively silencing him. Persephone still lapsed into self-absorption. Thaddeus struggled to fully acknowledge his father's flaws, and family gatherings remained complicated negotiations of new and old dynamics. But the fundamental shift had occurred. They saw me now, not just as their mother, not just as Harlan's widow, but as Marlo Everhart, architect, developer, CEO, a woman who had built an empire while they weren't looking. 6 months after my surgery, as summer reached its golden peak, I hosted a family dinner at Whispering Pines Estate, the first time all 3 children had been there together. Valencia came, as did Julian and Alessandra with the twins. Zach oversaw the grilling on the stone patio overlooking the lake, his easy competence in orchestrating the meal a reminder of how he had always moved comfortably between roles: contractor, business partner, dearest friend. As twilight descended and lanterns illuminated the gathering, I found myself standing slightly apart, observing the scene with quiet satisfaction. Thaddeus was explaining something to Valencia with animated gestures, while Persephone showed Alessandra photos on her phone, both of them laughing. Quentin and Julian sat with the twins, helping them roast marshmallows over a small fire pit with patient care. "Penny for your thoughts," Zach said, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of wine. "Just taking it all in," I replied, accepting the glass. "It's not perfect, but it's real," he finished for me. "It's real now." I nodded, knowing he understood exactly what I meant. The glossy veneer of Everhart family harmony had been stripped away, revealing the complicated, flawed, authentic relationships beneath. We were learning to see each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. "Do you regret any of it?" Zach asked, his voice low. "Keeping Phoenix secret for so long?" I considered the question carefully, watching my granddaughters giggle as marshmallow stuck to their fingers. "No," I said finally. I needed that time to build something that was truly mine, without the weight of others' expectations or judgments. I needed to prove to myself what I was capable of. And now? Now I'm ready for this next chapter, whatever it brings. Zach's hand found mine, warm and steady as it had always been. To new chapters, then. We clinked glasses gently, the crystal catching the last light of sunset. Around us, my family continued their conversations, their laughter, their tentative rebuilding of connections. They had called me a burden after my surgery, but in that moment of crisis, they had unwittingly set me free. Free to reveal the woman I had always been, the empire I had quietly built, and the strength that had been there all along, waiting to be acknowledged. My spine, once broken, now held me upright with newfound conviction. Sometimes, I reflected, watching the people I loved most in the world gather around the fire, it takes being shattered to discover what truly cannot be broken. Fall descended on Cascadia Heights with theatrical flair, crimson maples, golden, aspens, and the particular quality of light that turned the bay into hammered silver each morning. 9 months had passed since my surgery, and life had settled into a new rhythm built around my now public identity as Phoenix Holdings founder and CEO. On a brisk October morning, I arrived at the Prism Tower earlier than usual, eager to review the final proposals for our newest acquisition, a historic warehouse district on the city's south side that had languished for decades. The potential transformation excited me. Affordable artist lofts, community maker spaces, retail opportunities for local craftspeople. Evelyn had assembled a strong team of architects and urban planners, all guided by Quentin's insights on what would truly serve the creative community. I was absorbed in blueprints when a sharp knock interrupted my concentration. Valencia entered without waiting for a response, her typically calm demeanor disrupted by evident concern. "Marlo, have you seen this?" She placed a tablet on my desk, open to the business section of the Cascadia Heights Examiner. The headline hit like a physical blow. Everhart Development poised for hostile takeover of Phoenix Holdings. What? I quickly scanned the article, my confusion turning to cold anger as I absorbed its claims. According to the report, Everhart Development, a company I'd never heard of, had secretly acquired shares in several key Phoenix Holdings subsidiaries and was assembling financing for a complete takeover. "This can't be right," I said, reaching for my phone. "We're privately held. Our corporate structure was specifically designed to prevent this kind of maneuver." Valencia took a seat across from me. "I thought so too, but Jasper's been unusually smug lately at community board meetings. I suspected he was plotting something." As I dialed Emmanuel's number, a second call came through, Zach, his voice tense. "Marley, are you seeing the news?" "I'm on my way to the office." "I've got it in front of me. Meeting in 30 minutes with legal and financial teams," I replied, my mind already racing through possibilities. "And Zach, call Cameron at the registry office. I want to know exactly when Everhart Development was incorporated and by whom." By the time Zach arrived, I had assembled our crisis team in the main conference room, Emmanuel and her legal associates, our CFO Bernard Kasowski, Evelyn, and 2 external consultants specializing in corporate defense strategies. "What do we know?" I asked as everyone settled around the table. Emmanuel took the lead. "Everhart Development was incorporated 4 months ago. The principal is listed as Jasper Collier, with Thaddeus Everhart as executive vice president." The revelation of my son's involvement stung, but I forced myself to focus on the practical implications rather than the personal betrayal. "How significant is the threat?" I directed the question to Bernard, whose silver eyebrows were drawn together in concentration. "They've been clever," he admitted reluctantly. "They've targeted 3 of our subsidiary LLCs, Riverside Ventures, Harborview Properties, and North Star Developments. These entities own approximately 22% of our total holdings, but are structurally vulnerable because of how they were set up during Phoenix's early years. When I first began investing, I had created separate LLCs for each property to limit liability. As Phoenix grew, we maintained this structure but consolidated management. It had been efficient for operational purposes, but apparently created openings I hadn't anticipated. "Can they actually force a takeover?" Valencia asked, her medical Precision now applied to understanding this business crisis. Bernard and Emmanuel exchanged glances. "Not easily," Emmanuel said. "But they have pathways. If they gain controlling interest in those subsidiaries, they could potentially trigger clauses in our operating agreements that would force broader corporate restructuring." "In plain language," Bernard added, "they're trying to get a foot in the door to eventually pry it open completely." I took a measured breath, refusing to let panic cloud my judgment. Options? For the next hour, we dissected potential defensive strategies, from legal challenges to the incorporation of Everhart Development itself, on grounds of intentionally misleading naming, to financial countermoves that would strengthen Phoenix's position. By the meeting's end, we had a multi-pronged action plan, but the most immediate concern remained clearing up the public perception created by the news article. "We need a statement," Evelyn pointed out. "Our partners, tenants, and community stakeholders are already calling for clarification." "I'll draft something," I began, but Zach interrupted with uncharacteristic firmness. "No, Marley. This needs more than a statement. This needs a direct confrontation." I raised an eyebrow at my oldest friend and trusted advisor. "What are you suggesting?" "Call a press conference. This afternoon. Get ahead of this narrative immediately. And invite Jasper and Thaddeus to attend." Emmanuel nodded slowly. "Transparency would undermine their strategy. They're counting on confusion and behind-the-scenes maneuvering." "It's risky," Bernard cautioned. "If not handled perfectly, it could backfire." "So we handle it perfectly," Valencia said simply, turning to me. "Can you do that? Publicly confront your brother-in-law and son?" The question hung in the air, laden with implications beyond the immediate business crisis. This wasn't just about Phoenix Holdings. It was about finally and completely stepping into my power, refusing to be manipulated or marginalized by the men who had spent decades underestimating me. "Yes," I said, sudden clarity washing over me. "I can do that." "Evelyn, arrange the press conference for 3 p.m. in the Prism Tower atrium. Bernard, prepare a detailed fact sheet on Phoenix's corporate structure and holdings. Complete transparency. Emmanuel, draft a cease and desist order for Everhart Development, to be delivered during the press conference itself." As the team dispersed to execute their assignments, Zach lingered behind. "You're sure about this approach?" he asked quietly. "It's confrontational." "That's precisely why it's necessary," I replied, gathering my notes. "Jasper and Thaddeus are counting on me to behave as I always have, to avoid conflict, to negotiate quietly, to compromise rather than assert myself. That ends today." I reached for my phone and dialed Thaddeus's number. When his assistant answered, I used my most authoritative tone. "This is Marlo Everhart. Tell my son I expect him at the Prism Tower atrium at 3 p.m. today for a press conference regarding Everhart Development's attempted takeover of Phoenix Holdings. His presence is not optional." After hanging up, I made a similar call to Jasper's office, then contacted Persephone and Quentin, briefly explaining the situation and requesting their attendance as moral support. Quentin immediately agreed, sounding deeply troubled by his brother's involvement. Persephone surprisingly responded with unusual directness. "That absolute snake!" she hissed. I knew Thad was meeting with Uncle Jasper more than usual, but he told me it was about diversifying his investment portfolio. "I'll be there, Mother. Front row." The hours before the press conference passed in a blur of preparation. I reviewed. Talking points with our communications director changed into a commanding charcoal suit with a vibrant emerald blouse that brought out my eyes, and met briefly with key Phoenix Holdings department heads to ensure they understood our strategy. At 2:45, I took a moment alone in my office, standing at the window overlooking the city I had helped shape. Properties that Phoenix had developed or revitalized dotted the landscape. The renovation of Harbor Square that had transformed a decaying marina into a vibrant dining and shopping district, the mixed-income housing development on Grant Avenue that provided quality homes for service workers, the community arts complex in the old brewery district. This wasn't just business. It was legacy. I had built something meaningful, something that improved people's lives while remaining financially sound. I would not allow Jasper's wounded pride or Thaddeus's misguided ambition to dismantle it. At precisely 3 p.m., I descended to the atrium, where a significant media contingent had gathered. Local business reporters, real estate correspondents, and even a crew from the regional news network filled the chairs arranged before a simple podium bearing the Phoenix Holdings logo. To the side, a large screen displayed aerial photographs of our major developments. Valencia was already seated in the front row, elegant in a burgundy dress that complemented her professional demeanor. Beside her sat Quentin, unusually formal in a tailored blazer, his artistic nature still evident in the vibrant silk scarf at his throat. Persephone arrived moments later, making an entrance in a cream-colored designer suit that drew appreciative glances from several reporters. I scanned the room quickly, noting Jasper's presence at the back, his expression thunderous. Thaddeus was nowhere to be seen. Evelyn approached and murmured in my ear, "Thaddeus just called. He says he's unavoidably detained and won't make it." I nodded, unsurprised. He's avoiding public confrontation. Fine, we proceed as planned. Taking my place at the podium, I gazed out at the assembled crowd with calm determination. The room quieted immediately, anticipation palpable in the silence. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steady and clear. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I'm Marlo Everhart, founder and CEO of Phoenix Holdings. Today, I'm addressing reports regarding an attempted hostile takeover by a recently formed entity called Everhart Development." Camera shutters clicked rapidly as I continued, methodically dismantling the claims made in the morning's article. Phoenix Holdings is a privately held company with a carefully structured ownership model. While it's true that we operate through various subsidiary LLCs, our corporate governance agreements include specific provisions that prevent the kind of takeover being attempted. Our legal team has prepared a detailed fact sheet which will be distributed momentarily. I gestured to Emmanuelle, who began handing documents to the reporters, her professional demeanor masking the strategic missile we were launching. More concerning than the attempted takeover itself is the deliberate misinformation being spread about our company's vulnerability. Let me be absolutely clear. Phoenix Holdings is not for sale, not vulnerable to hostile acquisition, and not interested in any partnership with Everhart Development. A reporter's hand shot up. "Ms. Everhart, can you address the involvement of your son, Thaddeus Everhart, in this attempted takeover?" The question hung in the air, precisely as anticipated. I had prepared for this moment, knowing it would define not just the business narrative but my personal one as well. "I can," I replied evenly. "My son appears to have made a significant error in judgment by aligning himself with this ill-conceived venture. I invited him to join us today to explain his position directly, but he has declined to attend." Murmurs rippled through the audience. From the corner of my eye, I saw Persephone straighten in her chair, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. I would, however, like to address a question that many of you are probably wondering. How does a mother feel when her son attempts to seize control of her company? I paused, allowing the weight of the question to settle. The answer is that today I am speaking not primarily as a mother, but as the CEO of Phoenix Holdings. In that capacity, I view this as I would any other attempted hostile takeover, as a threat to be neutralized through every legal and financial means at our disposal. The bluntness of my response generated another wave of whispers among the reporters. I continued with unwavering focus. That said, I would like to directly address Jasper Collier, who I note is present today. I turned slightly to face Jasper, who had frozen in place at the back of the room. Mr. Collier has managed the Everhart family trusts since my late husband's death. He has never had any authority over Phoenix Holdings, nor any legitimate business interest in our operations. His formation of a company deliberately named to create confusion with our brand represents, in our legal team's assessment, a clear case of corporate identity infringement. Emmanuel rose smoothly and approached Jasper, handing him a thick, legal document. This cease and desist order requires Everhart Development to immediately halt all acquisition attempts and publicly clarify that they have no affiliation with Phoenix Holdings or the Everhart architectural legacy. Jasper's face darkened to an alarming shade of crimson as he snatched the document. Several photographers swiveled to capture the moment, exactly as we had hoped. Returning to my prepared remarks, I outlined Phoenix's current projects and future vision, emphasizing our commitment to sustainable development and community integration. I then opened the floor to questions, fielding them with steady confidence, about our financial position, strong, our response to the takeover attempt, multi-layered and aggressive, and whether this family conflict would impact our business. Operations, absolutely not. Just as the press conference was winding down, a commotion at the back of the room drew everyone's attention. Thaddeus had finally arrived, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, his normally perfect appearance marred by a loosened tie and an expression of barely controlled panic. "Mother," he called out, louder than necessary. "We need to talk. Privately." The reporters turned eagerly between us, sensing dramatic developments. I maintained my composed expression, refusing to show surprise at his sudden appearance. "Thaddeus," I acknowledged him with a nod. "I'm glad you could join us after all. Would you like to make a statement regarding Everhart Development's intentions toward Phoenix Holdings?" It was a calculated move, forcing him to either publicly align with Jasper's scheme or backpedal in front of the media. Thaddeus was nothing if not image-conscious, and I had just presented him with an impossible choice. He approached the podium slowly, eyes darting between the reporters and me. When he reached my side, he leaned in and whispered urgently, "The financing fell through. Jasper's primary investor pulled out an hour ago. We need to discuss damage control." I gave him a measured look, then turned back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, my son has just informed me that Everhart Development's financing arrangements have collapsed. It appears this attempted takeover has ended before it truly began." The room erupted with questions as reporters rushed to update their stories. Thaddeus stood rigidly beside me, his corporate mask barely concealing his humiliation. "I believe that concludes today's briefing," I stated firmly. "Phoenix Holdings will continue operating as usual, developing properties that enhance our community while providing sustainable returns for our investors. Thank you for your attention." As the media began to disperse, I turned to Thaddeus. "My office, now." He followed me silently to the private elevator, maintaining his dignified facade despite the circumstances. Neither of us spoke during the ascent to the executive floor. When we entered my office, I was surprised to find Jasper already waiting, having apparently used a service elevator to avoid the media. His face was flushed with anger, his habitual polish replaced by barely controlled rage. "You've made a spectacle of us," he spat as the door closed behind Thaddeus. "A public circus. That will damage both our reputations." "You created this situation," I replied calmly, taking my seat behind the desk. "You attempted a hostile takeover of my company using my son as your front man, and you expected me to respond with quiet acquiescence?" "It wasn't like that," Thaddeus interjected, sinking into a chair. "It was supposed to be a strategic merger. Everhart Development would acquire controlling interest in certain Phoenix subsidiaries, then propose a partnership that would benefit everyone." "Benefit everyone?" I repeated incredulously. "By wresting control of what I've built from me?" "By bringing it under proper family oversight," Jasper countered. "You've been operating completely independently, making decisions that affect Everhart family interests without consultation." Phoenix Holdings is not an Everhart family asset, I stated, enunciating each word clearly. It never has been. My company has nothing to do with Harlan's legacy or the trusts he established. You used Everhart connections to build it, Jasper insisted, leveraged relationships that belonged to the family. I felt a surge of indignation. I built Phoenix from nothing, using my own savings and expertise. Any relationships I cultivated were through my own efforts, not Harlan's name. Thaddeus shifted uncomfortably. Mother, you have to understand. From our perspective, you suddenly revealed this massive company that none of us knew about. It felt deceptive. So your response was attempted corporate theft rather than honest conversation? I asked, directing my gaze squarely at my son. This isn't about family oversight, Thaddeus. This is about control. Neither of you could accept that I built something valuable without your knowledge or permission. Jasper made a dismissive gesture. The point is moot now anyway. Our investor pulled out after conducting deeper due diligence on Phoenix's structure. Your corporate defenses are more robust than we anticipated. Of course they are, I replied. I designed them specifically to prevent exactly this kind of maneuver, though I never imagined it would come from my own family. A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside my window, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the harbor, highlighting the Embarcadero District revitalization that had been one of Phoenix's most successful projects. The contrast between the bright future I had built and the shadows of my past, represented by these two men and their outdated notions of patriarchal control, couldn't have been more stark. What happens now? Thaddeus finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Now, I said evenly, we deal with consequences. Emmanuel will proceed with legal action against Everhart Development for corporate identity infringement. Our PR team will issue a follow-up statement confirming that the takeover attempt has failed. And you two will need to decide where we go from here, as family and as business associates. You would sue your own son? Jasper asked incredulously. I would protect what I've built, I corrected him. Though I'm willing to consider alternatives if Everhart Development is immediately dissolved and a public apology issued. Thaddeus looked up sharply. An apology would be tantamount to admitting wrongdoing. Because there was wrongdoing, I stated simply. You conspired with Jasper to seize control of my company through deceptive means. Those are the facts. Before either could respond, a knock at the door heralded Valencia's arrival. She entered with purposeful strides, followed by Quentin and Persephone. The press has mostly departed, Valencia reported, though they're camped at the building exits hoping to catch Jasper or Thaddeus for comments. Vultures, Jasper muttered. No, Persephone corrected, her tone cutting. Journalists doing their jobs, reporting on a failed corporate raid that happened to involve family members stabbing each other in the back. She turned to Thaddeus, eyes flashing. Honestly, Thad, what were you thinking? Did you really believe this would work? Thaddeus straightened defensively. It was a legitimate business strategy. It was idiocy, Quentin said quietly, and beneath you, frankly. The tension in the room shifted as my three children faced each other, the siblings' dynamic now complicated by Thaddeus's actions. Perhaps, I suggested, this would be a good time for Jasper to excuse himself. This has become a family matter. Jasper hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave Thaddeus without support, but a pointed look from me made it clear this wasn't a request. He gathered his overcoat and the cease and desist order, pausing at the door. This isn't over, Marlowe, he said, attempting to reclaim some authority. Yes, Jasper, it is, I replied with finality. It was over the moment you made the mistake of underestimating me. Again. After he departed, the atmosphere in the room changed subtly. Valencia moved to stand beside my chair, a quiet gesture of solidarity. Persephone perched on the edge of my desk, while Quentin remained near the door, arms folded across his chest. "I believe," Valencia said after a moment, "that this might be a conversation best had without me. I'll check in with the legal team about next steps." Once she had left, I regarded my 3 children with a mixture of emotions. Disappointment in Thaddeus, gratitude for Quentin and Persephone's support, and beneath it all, a profound weariness at having to fight this battle at all. "Why?" I asked Thaddeus directly. "I want to understand what motivated this." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disrupting it in a way that made him suddenly look younger, more vulnerable. "It wasn't supposed to be hostile," he began, then stopped, reconsidering. "At least that's what I told myself. Uncle Jasper approached me about forming a new development company, leveraging my finance expertise with his connections. It seemed like a logical extension of my investment work." "And the targeting of Phoenix's subsidiaries?" I pressed. "That came later," he admitted. Uncle Jasper identified what he called strategic acquisition opportunities within Phoenix's portfolio. He framed it as bringing divergent family business interests back under unified management. "He played you," Persephone interjected bluntly. "He used your ambition and your ego to go after Mom's company?" Thaddeus shot her an irritated glance. "It wasn't that simple." "Actually," Quentin said, "it sounds exactly that simple. Uncle, Jasper couldn't stand that Mom built something significant without his involvement, so he enlisted you to help him take it." "And you went along with it," I added quietly, "despite knowing how much Phoenix means to me." Thaddeus had the grace to look ashamed. "I convinced myself it was just business, that we'd integrate Phoenix into a larger Everhart enterprise that would benefit everyone. I didn't see it as taking something from you, but as consolidating family resources." "That's because you still don't truly see Mom as separate from the Everhart identity," Quentin observed. "She's always been Dad's wife, or our mother, to you, not Marlo Everhart, architect and developer in her own right." The insight struck with remarkable precision. Thaddeus flinched slightly but didn't contradict his brother. "I've made a serious misjudgment," he finally conceded, looking directly at me. "Both professionally and personally. I apologize, Mother." The apology felt genuine, if somewhat calculated in its timing. Thaddeus had always been strategic, even in his contrition. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But rebuilding trust will take more than words. Actions matter now." "What do you want me to do?" he asked. I considered the question thoughtfully. The easy path would be to demand his public humiliation, a statement disavowing Everhart development, perhaps even his resignation from his position at Pinnacle Capital. But that wouldn't serve any constructive purpose. First, Everhart development needs to be dissolved immediately, I stated. Second, I want a private letter of apology from you, not for the public or the press, but for me personally, detailing what you've learned from this experience. And third, I want you to spend 2 weeks working directly with our community housing team in the Riverside District, understanding exactly what Phoenix does and why it matters. Thaddeus blinked in surprise at the last requirement. Working with the housing team? In what capacity? In whatever capacity the project manager assigns you, I replied firmly. This isn't about public penance, Thaddeus. It's about understanding the purpose behind what I've built. He considered for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I accept those terms. Good, I said, feeling a knot of tension release in my chest. Then we can begin to move forward. Persephone, who had been uncharacteristically restrained, suddenly laughed. Oh, Thad, your face when Mom called you out at the press conference. I wish I'd recorded it for posterity. Thaddeus shot her an exasperated look. Your sisterly support is touching as always, Seph. Hey, I'm on Team Mom here, she retorted. You're lucky she's not pressing charges. Children, I interrupted, a hint of maternal authority creeping into my voice despite the corporate setting. This has been an exhausting day for everyone. Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time. They recognized the dismissal in my tone. Persephone gave me a quick hug before departing, whispering, "You were magnificent today," in my ear. Quentin squeezed my shoulder supportively as he left. Thaddeus lingered, hesitating at the door. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "seeing you at that podium today, so completely in command, I finally understood what everyone's been trying to tell me. You built something remarkable, Mother. I'm sorry I tried to take it rather than simply admiring what you achieved." After he left, I sat alone in my office as dusk settled over Cascadia Heights. The confrontation had been necessary, even cathartic, but it had also cost something. Another layer of illusion stripped away about my family, about the men who had consistently underestimated me, about the nature of power itself. I picked up my phone and called Zach. "It's done," I told him when he answered. "Exactly as we planned. The takeover attempt is dead." "I saw the press coverage," he replied, his voice warm with pride. "You were extraordinary, Marley. How are you feeling?" I considered the question, taking stock of my emotional state. Tired, relieved, sad for Thaddeus, but also powerful, I admitted. For perhaps the first time in my life, truly powerful. Not because I won this particular battle, but because I finally stopped questioning whether I had the right to fight it in the first place. Zach's chuckle carried over the line. "About time. So what's next for the indomitable Marlo Everhart?" I gazed out at the city lights beginning to twinkle across the bay, at the skyline Phoenix Holdings had helped shape, at the future still waiting to be built. Dinner, I decided, with you, Valencia, and anyone else who stood by me today. Something with excellent wine and absolutely no discussion of corporate takeovers or family drama. "Now that," Zach said, "sounds like a perfect next move." Winter settled over Cascadia Heights like a gentle exhale, dusting the city with pristine snow that transformed the urban landscape. From the warmth of my office, I watched as pedestrians navigated the holiday-decorated streets below, their breath visible in the crisp December air. 1 year had passed since my surgery, a year that had reshaped not just my spine, but the very foundation of my existence. The calendar on my desk was open to the final week of December, marked with appointments, project deadlines, and family commitments. In the corner of my office stood a small, elegant Christmas tree decorated with miniature architectural models, a thoughtful gift from my staff. "Knock, knock," Valencia called from the doorway. "Ready for our lunch? The reservations?" "At noon." I smiled, closing the portfolio I'd been reviewing. "Just finishing up. Come in." Valencia entered, elegant as always in a burgundy pantsuit that complemented her warm complexion. Our friendship had deepened considerably over the past year, evolving from doctor-patient to something far more meaningful. Her clinical precision balanced my creative vision, making her an invaluable advisor for Phoenix's community health initiatives. "The Westridge Clinic's final inspection is scheduled for January 6th, she noted, glancing at my calendar. "We're ahead of schedule, remarkably." "Quentin's mural in the children's wing is nearly finished too," I added, gathering my coat and scarf. "He's incorporated elements from the neighborhood's history, shipbuilding, fishing, the old carousel that used to stand in Maplewood Park." "Your son has found his voice," Valencia observed as we headed toward the elevator. "In more ways than one." She was right. Of my 3 children, Quentin had undergone the most profound transformation in the wake of my revelation. The uncertain, young artist who had stood by silently during his siblings' dismissal of me had blossomed into a confident creative force, dividing his time between his own studio work and community arts initiatives. 2 months ago, he had been appointed to the city's Arts Commission, the youngest member in its history. Our lunch destination was Harbor House, an elegant seafood restaurant overlooking the bay. As we were seated at a window table, I spotted a familiar figure on the esplanade below, Thaddeus, walking briskly despite the cold, engaged in what appeared to be an intense phone conversation. My relationship with my eldest had stabilized into a tentative peace following the failed takeover attempt. True to his word, he had dissolved Everhart Development and completed his 2-week assignment with Phoenix's community housing team. The experience had visibly affected him, though in typical Thaddeus fashion, he processed his emotional reactions privately. "Have you given any more thought to his proposal?" Valencia asked, following my gaze. The proposal in question was Thaddeus's carefully crafted pitch for a genuine partnership between his investment firm and Phoenix Holdings. A legitimate collaboration focused on ethical urban development across multiple cities. Unlike Jasper's scheme, this proposal acknowledged and respected my leadership while offering complementary financial expertise. "I'm still considering it," I admitted. "The business case is sound. My hesitation is entirely personal." "Trust takes time to rebuild," Valencia said softly, unfolding her napkin, "especially when it's been so fundamentally broken." Our conversation shifted to lighter topics through the appetizer course: Valencia's plans to expand her medical practice, my upcoming architectural lecture at Barrett Institute, our shared appreciation for the chamber music series that had recently begun at the renovated Harlan Everhart Memorial Arts Center. As our main courses arrived, Valencia set down her fork and fixed me with her characteristically direct gaze. "So, are you going to tell me what's really on your mind today? You've been distracted since I arrived." I smiled slightly. After decades of hiding my thoughts behind a pleasant facade, I was still adjusting to friends who saw through my carefully constructed composure. "Zach asked me to marry him," I said quietly. Valencia's expression softened into genuine delight. "Marlo, that's wonderful news. When did this happen?" "Last night, at Larkspur Cottage. Nothing elaborate, just the two of us by the fireplace after dinner. Very Zach-like in its straightforward sincerity." "And your answer?" she prompted when I didn't continue. I twisted my water glass slowly. "I asked for time to think." Valencia studied me carefully. "May I ask why? You and Zach have been moving in this direction for months. Your feelings for him are obvious to anyone paying attention." "That's just it," I explained. "This past year has been about reclaiming my independence, establishing my identity separate from family obligations and expectations. Marriage feels like stepping back into a defined role." "Is that how you see it? As surrendering the autonomy you fought for?" The question cut to the heart of my hesitation. "Not rationally, no. Zach has never tried to contain or diminish me. Quite the opposite. He's championed my independence from the beginning. But emotionally, there's a reflexive caution that I can't quite shake." "Understandable, given your history with Harlan," Valencia observed. "But perhaps worth examining, whether you're responding to your past marriage or the actual relationship being offered now." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the restaurant's owner, a jovial man named Marco, who had become a friend since Phoenix Holdings helped finance his expansion 3 years earlier. "Ladies, a pleasure as always," he greeted us warmly. "I've just received a spectacular Barolo that I'd like you to try. On the house, of course." As Marco elaborated on the wine's provenance, I noticed a familiar, sleek convertible pulling into the restaurant's valet area. Persephone emerged, immaculate as always in a cream cashmere coat, her signature oversized sunglasses perched on her perfectly highlighted hair. "Unexpected company," I murmured to Valencia as Marco departed to fetch the wine. Persephone usually avoids Harbor House, too old establishment for her taste. Sure enough, moments later, Persephone swept into the dining room, spotted us immediately, and changed course toward our table with purposeful strides. "Mother, Valencia, what perfect timing, she exclaimed, bending to air kiss each of us before pulling up a chair without waiting for an invitation. I was just driving by after my meeting with the Embarcadero District Business Association when I saw your car in the parking lot. How was the meeting? I asked, genuinely curious. Persephone's wellness brand had recently opened its flagship store in Phoenix's revitalized Embarcadero development, a strategic business decision that had initially raised my concerns about mixing family and commerce. Transformative, she declared, her enthusiasm undiminished by our mild skepticism. I've been elected to chair the marketing committee. We're planning a spring festival to highlight local artisans and wellness practitioners. As Persephone launched into elaborate details about promotional strategies and social media campaigns, I observed my middle child with quiet appreciation. For all her superficial focus on appearance and status, Persephone possessed genuine entrepreneurial talent and boundless energy. Her business had flourished over the past year, expanding from a modest lifestyle blog to a respected wellness brand, with growing national recognition. Our impromptu three-way lunch stretched into the afternoon, with Persephone eventually setting aside her phone to engage in actual conversation. When the topic turned to holiday plans, she revealed an unexpected development. I've invited Uncle Jasper and Aunt Emmeline for Christmas dinner, she announced, studying my reaction carefully. Thad thought you should know before they arrive. I set down my coffee cup deliberately. That's surprising. Is it? Persephone tilted her head. Family is family, Mother, even when they behave abominably. Besides, Aunt Emmeline has been nothing but supportive of you. Should she be excluded because her husband is a dinosaur with wounded pride? Valencia suppressed a smile at Persephone's blunt assessment. You're right, of course, I conceded. Emmeline shouldn't be punished for Jasper's actions, and perhaps a year is long enough for this particular estrangement. Excellent, Persephone looked genuinely pleased. Though, fair warning, I've seated him at the opposite end of the table from you, with the twins on either side. He'll be too busy preventing crayon disasters to cause any trouble. The thoughtfulness behind this seating arrangement, protecting me while still including Jasper, revealed a sensitivity I hadn't always credited Persephone with possessing. My children were still surprising me even now. After settling the bill over Persephone's token protests, Valencia and I walked along the waterfront, our breath visible in the winter air. The conversation returned inevitably to Zach's proposal. What does your heart tell you? Valencia asked as we paused to watch a ferry crossing the bay. That I'm 60 years old and too practical for romantic indecision, I replied with a wry smile. Nonsense. The heart doesn't recognize age limits on uncertainty. I considered her words, watching seagulls wheel against the pearl gray sky. My heart says that Zach Sterling understands me better than anyone ever has, that he's seen me clearly, from the beginning, not as an extension of Harlan, not as merely the children's mother, but as myself. That seems like a solid foundation, Valencia observed. It is, I agreed, but there's something else holding me back. What? I turned to face my friend directly. Fear. Not of losing my independence, but of deserving happiness this complete. After decades of compression and compromise, I'm afraid to fully embrace this new chapter. Valencia's expression softened with understanding. The surgery that broke your spine ultimately helped it heal stronger. Perhaps this is the final step in that recovery, believing you deserve the life you've created. As twilight descended over Cascadia Heights, I made my way to Whispering Pines Estate. I hadn't told Zach I was coming. I needed time alone in this sanctuary to clarify my thoughts before giving him my answer. The caretaker's cottage was dark when I arrived, but the main house glowed with warmth, light spilling from its windows onto the snow-covered grounds. Puzzled, I parked beside Zach's familiar green truck and made my way to the front entrance. Inside, I found an unexpected tableau. The great room had been transformed. a fire crackling in the stone hearth, candles illuminating the space with gentle light, the dining table set for an intimate dinner for two, and in the center of it all stood Zach, looking uncharacteristically nervous in a crisp button-down shirt rather than his usual work clothes. "Zach?" I questioned, taking in the scene. "What is all this?" He approached slowly, hands in his pockets. "I figured you'd come here to think. You always do when you're making important decisions." "How did you know?" "Marley," he interrupted gently. "I've known you for 35 years. I know when you need space and when you need company." Tonight seemed like a bit of both. The simple truth of his statement, the depth of understanding it represented, washed over me like a wave. This man had witnessed every phase of my life, had supported me through Harlan's neglect, through widowhood, through rebuilding myself, piece by piece. He had never demanded recognition or reward, had never tried to claim ownership of my success or my struggles. "I haven't answered your question yet," I said softly. Zach smiled, the familiar crinkles deepening around his eyes. "I know. And if you need more time, that's okay too. This isn't pressure. It's just me saying that whatever you decide, I'm here." I moved toward him slowly, taking in the solid reliability of his presence, the weathered hands that had built alongside mine, the clear eyes that had always seen me wholly. "I don't need more time," I realized aloud. I was overcomplicating things, as usual. Zach waited, patient as always. "Yes," I said simply. "My answer is yes." His smile deepened as he closed the distance between us, taking my hands in his. "You're sure? I don't want you to feel that you're giving up anything you've fought for." "I'm not giving up anything," I replied with sudden clarity. "I'm adding to a life that's finally completely mine." Later, after we had shared the dinner he'd prepared, we sat before the fire, discussing practical matters with the easy companionship of old friends and the gentle anticipation of new lovers. "I don't want to leave Larkspur Cottage," I told him. "It's finally become truly mine, not just Harlan's legacy." "Of course not," Zach agreed readily. "I've always loved that house anyway. Though my lease is up in March, so timing works out nicely. And the business remains exactly as it is," he finished firmly. "Phoenix is your company, Marley. I'm happy with my role as it stands." The ease of these negotiations, the complete absence of power struggles or wounded pride, confirmed what I already knew. This relationship existed in a different universe from my marriage to Harlan. "The children will have opinions," I noted with a small smile. Zach chuckled. "I'm counting on it. Persephone will insist on planning an unnecessarily elaborate wedding. Thaddeus will want to review the prenuptial agreement, which, for the record, I'm completely fine with. And Quentin will be genuinely happy for us," I finished. "That's my prediction too," Zach agreed, pulling me closer. As winter deepened over Cascadia Heights, my life settled into a new rhythm, one that integrated my roles as CEO, mother, and now fiancé, without requiring the compartmentalization that had characterized my earlier years. Phoenix Holdings continued to thrive, with the Westridge Community Development garnering national attention for its innovative approach to mixed-income housing and integrated health services. Valencia's clinic opened in January, immediately drawing praise for its accessible design and comprehensive care model. Quentin's murals throughout the complex added warmth and artistry that transformed institutional spaces into genuinely welcoming environments. Thaddeus and I eventually reached an agreement on a limited partnership between Phoenix and his investment firm, a carefully structured collaboration that maintained clear boundaries while leveraging our complementary expertise. The first joint project, a sustainable urban development in a neighboring city, broke ground in early spring. Persephone's prediction about Christmas dinner proved accurate. Jasper maintained a stiff formality throughout the evening, but refrained from outright hostility. Emmeline, by contrast, offered me a warm embrace and whispered congratulations when she noticed the understated engagement ring on my left hand. The children's reactions varied from Quentin's genuine delight to Thaddeus's careful neutrality to Persephone's immediate launch into wedding planning mode. Nothing extravagant, I cautioned as she scrolled through venue options on her tablet. We're thinking a small ceremony at Whispering Pines in the spring. Mother, she protested, you own one of the most gorgeous estates in the region. We should absolutely showcase it with a proper celebration. Nothing over the top, just elegant and meaningful. To my surprise, I found myself yielding to her enthusiasm. Perhaps it was time to step fully into the light, to celebrate not just my relationship with Zach, but everything I had built. My company, my reclaimed identity, my healing family connections. On a perfect May afternoon, with cherry blossoms drifting across immaculate lawns, Whispering Pines Estate hosted a gathering that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Beneath a canopy of flowering trees, surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues, I married the man who had always seen me clearly. Valencia stood beside me as my maid of honor, elegant in a silver-blue dress that complemented her natural dignity. My 3 children, despite their complicated feelings about seeing their mother remarry, participated with genuine goodwill, Persephone managing the details with characteristic flair, Thaddeus escorting me down the aisle with formal correctness, softened by a whispered, "He's a good man, Mother," and Quentin reading a poem he had written for the occasion, his artist's soul capturing the journey that had brought Zach and me to this moment. Even Jasper and Emmeline attended, though Jasper maintained a careful distance throughout the celebration. Emmeline, however, approached me during the reception, taking both my hands in hers. "You've built something remarkable, Marlowe," she said quietly. "Not just Phoenix Holdings, but this life, on your own terms, in your own way." "It took me long enough," I replied with a rueful smile. "Some lessons can only be learned in their own time," she observed, her gaze drifting to where Jasper stood stiffly at the edge of the gathering. "Some people never learn them at all." As the celebration continued around us, I found myself drawn to a quiet moment with my grandchildren. Thaddeus's twins, now 7 years old, had served as flower girls, their matching dresses now somewhat rumpled from exuberant dancing. "Grammy?" Eliza asked, tugging at my hand. "Is Mr. Zach our grandpa now?" "If you'd like him to be," I answered, smoothing her tousled hair. Her sister Amelia considered this seriously. "Does that mean we get to visit his workshop and use the power tools?" I laughed, remembering Zach's patient woodworking lessons with Quentin years ago. "Perhaps when you're a little older, and with proper supervision." "Dad never lets us do anything fun," Amelia sighed dramatically. "He says it's too dangerous." "Your father wants to keep you safe," I explained. "But I suspect Grandpa Zach might be able to convince him that learning to build things is an important skill." The girls exchanged excited glances before racing off to find Zach, presumably to begin lobbying for workshop access immediately. I watched them go, these bright young lives just beginning to unfold, and felt a profound sense of continuity, not the restrictive legacy that Harlan and Jasper had envisioned, but something organic and evolving, a family learning to recognize and respect each member's individual journey. As twilight descended on the celebration, Zach found me at the edge of the terrace, gazing out at the lights of Cascadia Heights twinkling in the distance. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Sterling?" he asked, slipping an arm around my waist. "Still Everhart professionally," I reminded him with a smile. "Though Sterling has a nice ring to it for everything else." "Absolutely," he agreed easily. "So, what's on your mind?" I leaned into his solid warmth, considering the question. "I was thinking about journeys. How sometimes we have to break before we can become who we're meant to be." Zach nodded thoughtfully. "Your surgery. That, yes. but also the breaking of illusions, about family, about obligations, about what I was allowed to want from life. "And now?" he prompted gently. I turned to face my husband, this man who had been patient enough to wait for me to find my own strength before offering his as compliment rather than replacement. Now I understand that some burdens are actually opportunities in disguise. My children calling me a burden after my surgery. That forced me to finally reveal my true self, my accomplishments, my abilities, my independence. Without that painful moment, I might have continued hiding in plain sight indefinitely. Zach's expression softened with understanding. From burden to empire builder. Not a bad transformation. Not bad at all, I agreed, turning back to gaze at the city I had helped shape, at the future still unfolding before us. And the best part? The story isn't over yet. It's still being written, one day at a time. Music drifted from the reception, calling us back to the celebration, to family and friends, to the life we had chosen together, to all the chapters yet to come. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.